Hey, it's James, and welcome to the latest installment of the Inversiverse, Episode 17 Belief Machines Language, Desire, and the Engine of Reality. An exploration of how symbols, stories, and emotion conspire to manufacture perception in the age of mass influence. We do not see the world as it is, we see it as we are, and as we are told it should be. In the age of infinite information, our thoughts, emotions, and even desires are shaped by unseen forces. Ideologies disguised as facts, symbols that mask the intellect, and scripts that govern our inner lives. We are belief machines running on language and emotion, conditioned by repetition, ritual, and reward. But what if the beliefs we live by are not our own? What if progress, freedom, and happiness are carefully engineered illusions? In this episode of the Inversiverse, we explore the hidden engines of perception, the linguistic codes, emotional algorithms, and manufactured myths that determine how we interpret reality. This journey begins with a critical look at one of the most seductive illusions of all, the myth of progress. Through utopian promises, technocratic control, and global narratives of sustainability and equity, we are being programmed to embrace a future designed by others. Let's step into the first layer of the machine. 1. The cult of progress, utopian myths, technocracy, and global governance. Before we examine how global narratives shape the way we define progress, it's essential to understand the key pillars of this constructed reality. In this section, we break down the ideology of advancement through four interlocking domains. The illusion of inevitable advancement, exploring how utopian visions like Agenda 2030 frame the future as a moral imperative, often bypassing debate or dissent. Technocracy and the shift in governance, examining how decisions once made by elected representatives are increasingly outsourced to experts and private partnerships. Cultural Marxism and public discourse, unpacking the controversial term and its role in ideological battlegrounds over tradition, identity, and power. Structures of governance and citizen impact, detailing how modern governance centralizes authority while claiming to empower, and the implications for democratic accountability. Each of these subsections helps reveal how belief in progress can become a tool for engineered consent, steering entire populations through optimism, fear, and the manipulation of language. Point 1. The illusion of inevitable advancement. The narrative of unceasing progress has long been a cornerstone of Western political and economic ideology. This belief posits that technological innovation and globalization inherently lead to societal improvement. However, this assumption often overlooks the complexities and unintended consequences of such developments. Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. Adopted by all United Nations member states in 2015, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity. The UK government has committed to this agenda by integrating the SDGs into its domestic policy through departmental plans and reporting mechanisms. While the goals aim to address global challenges, critics argue that the implementation often lacks transparency and can lead to top-down policies that may not account for local contexts. Challenges in implementation. Despite commitments, the UK faces significant hurdles in achieving these goals. For instance, the country is projected to fall short of its target to build at least 43 gigawatts of offshore wind power by 2030, with only 33 gigawatts likely to be operational. Additionally, policy and planning delays have led major energy companies such as SSE to reduce their investments in renewable projects, casting doubt on the UK's ability to meet its clean energy targets. Personal reflection. The promise is utopia, efficient power generation, green energy, a better future. But it's all built on an inversion. The rhetoric and propaganda tell us this is the path forward, a necessary transition, yet what they don't reveal is the cost. The damage being done directly contradicts their stated aims and visions. But they're not trying to win you over with logic. They appeal to your emotions. The narrative goes, if we don't make these sweeping changes, the world will suffer. It is simply not true, they tell you. Global temperatures will rise, sea levels will climb, and so fear and panic are stoked to ensure mass compliance. But it's built on deception. Once you detach your emotions from their engineered outcomes, the flaws in their logic become obvious. Constructing the infrastructure for these so-called solutions, massive farms, extraction systems, and grids, is more destructive to both the micro and macro environments than the systems they claim to replace. The mineral extraction utilizes more fossil fuels. The chemicals and minerals extracted are highly toxic and dangerous, and many employed to do such tasks are children forced into slave labor in Africa. Not only are they forced to work, they are exposed to dangers that in the long term end their lives prematurely. This is one of the issues reported above in meeting their goals and visions, the failure to report back on the governance. It's not failure, it is intention. They are lying by omission. It's okay for people to protest, but it's only virtue-signaling individuals do not consider every aspect of the overall argument. It's very contradictory, full of fallacies, double standards, and hypocrisy, and it is something the masses need to become aware of. However, the mass media, a mainstream media propaganda machine, has the attention of many unconscious and unknowing minds. One such double standard for these protesters is they arrange their protests by computer, mobiles, and communication structures, powered by the very infrastructure they protest. At times I find it amusing, and other times continue to sit and observe in dismay. We are creating the world they claim they want to avoid. We're not creating a utopia, we are creating their dystopia, their inverted projected image, and people blindly follow and comply, walking us into an irreversible oblivion. The long-term effects are more detrimental to the planet. The waste material further pollutes the environment, the means of disposal, and the life cycle of such designs. It's not what they claim it to be. It is just to return it to the ground in a more dangerous capacity than before it was extracted, and conveniently it grants them greater central control. But this control serves them, not the people. Oxford University Professor Emeritus Wade Allison has warned in a paper published by a non-profit group that his analysis of wind power generation data reveals serious inefficiency in this alternative energy resource. The generation of electricity by wind tells a disappointing story. Alf Allison writes in a 2023 paper for the Global Warming Policy Foundation. Inefficiency is not the only problem with wind power, adds Prof. Allison, who teaches mathematics and physics at Oxford, is a researcher for the European Organization for Nuclear Research, known as CERN, and supports nuclear energy. He says, vast farms that monopolize the natural environment are built to the detriment of other creatures. According to Prof. Allison, a global push to reduce and eliminate fossil fuel emissions has led to an instinctive reaction to turn to renewables, whose sources, originating from the sun, are intermittent and weak. He says, the political enthusiasm and the investor hype are not supported by the evidence, even for offshore wind. Professor Allison provides the following example. If the wind speed is 10 meters per second, the power is 600 watts per square meter at 100% efficiency. That means to deliver the same power as Hinkley Point C by wind would require 5.5 million square meters of turbine-swept area, which should be quite unacceptable to those who care about birds and to other environmentalists. Moreover, if the wind drops to half speed, the power available drops by a factor of 8. Almost worse, if the wind speed doubles, the power delivered goes up 8 times, and as a result, the turbine has to be turned off for its protection, he writes. There is also a problem with grid storage battery technology that is used to store the power generated by wind, the professor adds. It can provide for laptops and other portable applications, even car batteries at up to 75 kilowatt hours, but larger batteries have problems with safety and mineral shortages. Batteries 20 million times larger are never going to be available, he argues, and storage batteries will never make good the failure of offshore wind farms when the wind speed drops for a week. The wind can drop for longer periods than that. 1.2 Technocracy and the shift in governance. Rise of technocratic governance. Technocracy refers to the governance or control of society by technical experts. In the UK, there has been a growing trend towards technocratic decision-making, particularly in economic and environmental policies. This shift is evident in the increasing reliance on independent bodies and experts to set policy directions, sometimes at the expense of democratic accountability. Public-private partnerships and the World Economic Forum. The UK has partnered with the WEF to foster innovation and support future industries. While such collaborations aim to drive economic growth, they also raise concerns about the influence of unelected bodies on national policy making. It's corporate fascism, plain and simple. Critics argue that these partnerships can lead to a form of governance where decisions are made without sufficient public oversight. Reflection. This is already happening. The United Kingdom hasn't partnered with the World Economic Forum. It has been taken over by the World Economic Forum, and through submission by leaders such as Keir Starmer and those before him, the linguistic and policy guise of a partnership is false, and an illusion which frames it as a positive. It is only partnership by name. In reality, it is an authoritarian regime. Keir Starmer, the day he was elected, openly stated his pledge and priorities were to the World Economic Forum before the citizens of the United Kingdom in his first public statement. His own words, an admission of traitorship, and people still refuse to accept his intentions are bad for the people. He openly stated his intentions. What do you not understand? The United Kingdom government continues to act in denying people public oversight. Such an example of late is the UK voted to leave the European Union in June 2016 by a large enough margin to win the vote and mandate action, and now Starmer, without public consultation, has renegotiated terms and conditions with the European Union, surrendering power of the United Kingdom to the European Union for what's heralded as the lie of better deals for the people. We were entwined to the European Union before and voted to leave because we were not getting a good deal. But the European Union and its authoritarian monkeys can't help but to reattach its claws and unleash power. The European Union also recently intervened in Romanian politics, stopping particular candidates from running for the Romanian presidency prime ministerialship, a disgusting intervention by a group of unelected bureaucrats. An act of dictatorship and a blatant denial of the United Kingdom public's wishes. This isn't democratic process. It is the act of ignoring people and dictating the conditions they live under. Through his betrayal, forcing people into acceptance, which is grossly aberrant, and in line with the authoritarian priorities of the European Union and World Economic, who frequently deny people, and then project their assumption of power, is good for the people. Taking the decisions out of people's hands is not good for them, and never will be. 1.3 Cultural Marxism and Public Discourse. Understanding cultural Marxism. The term cultural Marxism has been used in public discourse to describe perceived efforts to undermine traditional Western values through cultural institutions. However, scholars and watchdog organizations have identified this concept as a conspiracy theory with anti-Semitic origins. The use of this term by public figures has sparked controversy and debate about the boundaries of political rhetoric. Impact on policy and society. The invocation of cultural Marxism in political discourse can polarize public opinion and distract from substantive policy discussions. It often serves as a catch-all explanation for complex social changes, thereby oversimplifying and misrepresenting the dynamics at play. Personal experience. This has been identified as a conspiracy theory by scholars, watchdogs, and organizations. In my opinion, it's utter tripe and a deflection of reality, another myth. The reason they claim it's a conspiracy theory is because it is highlighting their corruption and ideological thought processes, authoritarian regimes. The truth is open to scrutiny. Lies lead to more lies, and they do not like their ideologies to be held to account, or for them to take responsibility of their detrimental policy, and every time they are called to account for their corrupt actions, they resort instantly to the emotional string pulling of the people. It is not a conspiracy to highlight their lies. It is not a conspiracy to question whether their actions are for the benefit of the few and not the masses. Their illusional ideologies are so bright and shiny. On paper, it draws on the emotional and subconscious levels of individuals. Oh, how can I not vote for improving lives? You can learn to discern and see the lies for what they are. The two-faced actions of liars. They will tell you everything they need to make you drop your emotional guard and allow them your power, and once the manipulators. Liars and politicians have dredged deep enough to create an emotional tie to you, to their words, and have gained your trust, gained whatever they wanted from you. They will then switch up, and you then no longer matter. This is demonstrated daily in Western politics. People in the UK called for rape gang inquiry. The UK government dismissed it. Your wants, needs, and desires, plus the promise of improving lives, disappears quicker than you can say the word denial. This is known as an emotional discard, and psychopaths, sociopaths, and narcissists are very good at this behavior. Yet highlighting this to people is very difficult. It occurs in politics. It occurs in daily life between friends, family, and through loving relationships. Marxism and cultural Marxism are an illusion, a carrot-dangling process of emotions to draw people into an illusionary dream state. They make all the promises, their words are cheap, yet their actions always show you what their true intentions are. Everything is always going to be better under their ideologies, yet the homelessness, the food banks, the job losses, the financial hardship, the mass death from poverty and illness, at display for all their behaviors to deliver utopian ideals, are incongruent. These ideologies have already held the power to provide a positive influence for many decades now. Across many Western countries, especially, they promise the utopia. My question is, where is it then? I see all of the above mentioned happening, and constant global wars to boot, where women, children, and men are being sacrificed without question or opposition. Yeah, amazing how that inversion of utopia is an actual dystopia, yet people continue to turn a blind eye, deny such evils are occurring. Yet people will post their virtual outrage online almost daily. I can't believe my energy bill has risen. I now have to work 2 jobs. I can't afford to eat, and there was me, thinking all their policies were meant to improve our lives. Never mind. Keep living in avoidance, because the utopia will never happen. Unfortunately, so many will needlessly suffer in the pursuit of these evil people's drive to empower themselves and only themselves. 1.4 Structures of governance and citizen impact. Centralization of power. The UK's governance structure is characterised by a concentration of power within the executive branch, particularly the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. While this can lead to efficient decision-making, it also raises concerns about the marginalisation of parliamentary scrutiny and public input. Democratic accountability. The increasing role of technocratic bodies and public-private partnerships in policy-making challenges traditional democratic processes. As decisions are made by experts or in collaboration with private entities, there is a risk that the voices of ordinary citizens may be diminished, leading to policies that do not fully reflect public interests. Personal reflection. We now have a form of technocratic governance in all but name, and many do not want to accept this is a reality. One of the first moves they made during the COVID pandemic was to introduce a technical app, the NHS Track and Trace. They said the actions were to track the virus. It was a lie. It was to subtly nudge people into complying with their technological forms of control, to check in places, to acquire certification for passports travel. Vaccine statuses could be integrated with various applications so that officials could be shown, acquiring the government the ability to control movement between corporate entities and establishments, using applications to drive greater fear into people by having updates sent out through application messaging that there were, increased diagnosis of COVID in particular places and areas. Now we have become aware that they struggled with achieving the presentation of fearful diagnosis numbers. Matt Hancock and various other politicians' conversations have since been leaked, where they were literally seeking measures to falsify the numbers and how to strategically target more fear, with made-up viruses to scare people into accepting further lockdowns. A real pandemic doesn't seek to find and fraudulently acquire numbers to fudge. The evidence would be clear as day. Their strategy was blatant manipulation, not measures of protection. The list of public violations and conflicts of interest during the time could go on for 10 more pages, and we're just meant to look on and accept it. Only cowards accept being bullied into compliance. Personal reflection continued. Then the stupid distancing measures, backed by no science whatsoever. Dr. Fauci recently stated in the US Congress he made up the science, a full public admission, and folks still refuse to accept it. Wearing a mask in public places, moving between tables, then removing them. It was very embarrassing to witness to see how many complied because of their fearful emotional state. The mental disconnect occurred, therefore blocking access to the brain, which allows for critical and logical thinking. Add compliance for a reward to the government for safety. How can you be safe in one spot and not another? Why do I have to wear my mask in spot A and not B? But they were all in the same room. It was just farcical. But they were mocking people's stupidity and not wearing them themselves. Total hypocrisy and double standards. Hypocrisy, a concept that many don't seem to grasp. It's so dangerous, people, for you, but not for me, so I'm excused from wearing a mask. Their actions were clearly do as I say, not as I do. They will never openly admit their actions. That's what liars, gaslighters, and manipulators do best, alight and mask their words with nuance, subtleties, and pleasantries, but the shadow of their actual intentions, once they have hooked you emotionally. Conclusion to the cult of progress, utopian myths, technocracy, and global governance. The ideology of progress, when scrutinized without emotional bias, reveals itself as less about societal uplift and more about strategic deception. Wrapped in utopian promise, our governments and global institutions champion visions of clean energy, equality, and sustainability, yet the reality they construct is riddled with contradictions, omissions, and outright manipulations. The language of progress has become a spell, emotionally charged, morally coercive, and factually inconsistent. You are not invited to consider the full cost of this transition. The environmental destruction caused by mineral extraction for green technologies is immense, polluting ecosystems, exploiting vulnerable labor markets, and worsening the very issues it purports to solve. It is not a failure of governance, it is a calculated deception. When children in Africa mine toxic minerals under conditions that strip them of dignity and life, and this is omitted from official reports. It is not oversight, it is intention. These costs are deliberately hidden to preserve the illusion. What's more, public compliance is no longer cultivated through truth or debate, but through the engineering of fear. Emotional manipulation has replaced logic. During the COVID-19 pandemic, applications like the NHS track and trace system were marketed as safety tools, but in hindsight, and through leaked communications, they appear as tools of behavioral conditioning. Movement, access, and freedom were contingent on digital compliance. Fear was updated in real time via notifications. Case numbers were not just reported, they were manufactured to produce an emotional effect. This technocratic model of governance, rule by expert, justified by crisis, has been normalized. With figures like Dr. Fauci admitting the scientific basis for social distancing was fabricated, and with UK politicians like Keir Starmer pledging loyalty to global organisations like the WEF before their own citizens, it becomes clear that democratic process has been sidelined. The UK public voted to leave the EU in 2016, yet without consultation, and new deals have been made that once again entangle the nation in supranational frameworks. The people spoke and were ignored. Cultural Marxism, dismissed by many scholars as a conspiracy, functions not only as a lightning rod in public discourse, but also as a lens to question ideological imposition. If a policy consistently harms the people it claims to help, then the intention behind it must be re-evaluated. Calling out hypocrisy, coercion, and manipulation is not paranoia, it is discernment. The charge of conspiracy is often weaponized to deflect scrutiny from power. Today, vast green infrastructures monopolize landscapes, pushing out wildlife and local communities. Protesters who oppose these structures frequently do so through the very technologies they critique: smartphones, networks, social platforms, all powered by the same destructive systems. Their outrage, often superficial, lacks systemic awareness and is easily absorbed by the same apparatus of control. We are not building utopia, we are building their dystopia, one blind agreement at a time. The inversion is so complete that the masses can't distinguish savior from oppressor. That is the essence of the belief machine. It doesn't ask for your reason, it only needs your emotion. It offers protection while installing dependencies. It promises unity while enforcing division. It delivers control under the banner of freedom. So we must ask again, is the future being built for us or around us? The answer may depend on how willing we are to detach from the emotional theatre of progress and confront the architecture of control that lies beneath it. Every action the architects of progress take is a direct inversion of the laws of detachment. Their ideological systems form attachments they force. They do not allow for freedom and autonomy. Our solutions are illogical because the premise of their system is emotional manipulation. It's imperative to learn to control your emotions, to see past the illusions, or they will all continue to control us all. 2. Mimetic mind, language, symbols, and the architecture of belief. Language as a trap and a tool. Words create worlds. Long before political regimes or economic structures were installed, there were stories, symbols etched into stone, mythologies passed down, and sacred scripts interpreted as truth. Language is not merely a medium of communication. It is the framework that shapes thought, identity, and ultimately belief. As Alfred Korzybski famously observed, the map is not the territory, yet we often live and die by maps we mistake for reality. Let's pause for an activity. Overview. This reflective activity helps individuals identify manipulative language patterns in conversations, media, or policy speech and connect them to personal reactions, biases, and responses. It also invites a critical re-examination of moments where emotional language altered perception, drawn from past reflections made in the Inversiverse series. Activity: detecting linguistic manipulation in daily life. Choose a recent conversation or media excerpt that made you feel a strong emotional response, either outrage, fear, comfort, or urgency. Identify framing words or slogans. Ask, what is being implied but not directly said? Who benefits from this framing? What would this message sound like if rewritten neutrally? Reflect. Did I initially agree with this message based on emotion or logic? Have I experienced a similar shift in perception before? Personal integration, drawn from my reflections. Scenario: during the COVID-19 lockdown, the phrase for public safety was used to justify mask mandates, travel restrictions, and digital tracking apps. Initial reaction: I complied at first, but I quickly began to observe the absurdity of mandates being enforced selectively, like masks worn while walking to a table but removed once seated. Awareness shift. After hearing Dr. Fauci admit that distancing rules weren't based on science, I recognized the manipulation. That moment helped me detach emotionally from the narrative. I stopped assuming that policy equaled truth and began questioning the emotional mechanisms being used to bypass logic. Language can bypass logic by appealing to moral or emotional reflexes. By identifying these patterns early, you rewire your response from reactive belief to conscious discernment. Language is both our greatest tool and our most subtle prison. Cognitive linguists such as George Lakoff have shown that the way information is framed determines how it is interpreted. A war on terror is not the same as a campaign for peace. A cost of living crisis implies an external force, whereas corporate exploitation demands accountability. These frames guide perception, personal reflection. Throughout the Inversiverse project, one recurring motif has been the ease with which reality can be shaped when language is used to bypass logic and trigger emotions. From the way media described lockdowns as safety measures to how sustainable energy policies are called climate action, the rhetorical framing subtly shifts the burden of scrutiny away from those in power. Memes as viruses of belief. Richard Dawkins coined the term meme to describe an idea that replicates and spreads much like a gene. But in the 21st century, memes are far more than humorous internet graphics. They are units of ideology, weaponized shorthand for belief systems. A meme doesn't need to be true. It only needs to be emotionally resonant and endlessly repeatable. Memes such as "Trust the science, build back better," or "Silence is violence" contain layered ideological instructions, often bypassing critical thought. These phrases act like executable programs. Once internalized, they activate specific behaviors, loyalties, and fears. Symbolic subjugation, occult imagery in institutions. We are also surrounded by symbols, many of which originate from esoteric and occult traditions. The eye of providence on currency, the fasces in US Congress, or the triple helix used in EU research initiatives, these aren't accidental design choices. Symbols bypass verbal reasoning and speak directly to the subconscious. Carl Jung believed that symbols hold archetypal power. When a symbol becomes embedded in the public psyche without being consciously examined, it begins to operate autonomously, shaping our worldview without our consent. Legalese and the language of control. Legal language, also known as legalese, is another form of linguistic domination. Statutes and regulations are written in an almost impenetrable dialect that obfuscates meaning. Citizens are expected to comply, yet are rarely capable of understanding the rules they are governed by. This form of linguistic alienation furthers dependency on institutions and experts. Personal experience. The power of framing in health and safety narratives. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw language used to reinforce behavioral scripts. Terms like essential travel, social distancing, and flatten the curve were framed as scientific necessities, yet many of them, by later admission, had no clear empirical basis. Dr. Fauci's eventual statement that distancing rules were not grounded in established science highlights how quickly a phrase can become policy, and policy can become law. And newspeak and euphemism. George Orwell's concept of newspeak in 1984 predicted a world where vocabulary shrinks to limit thought. While we have not fully arrived there, the increasing use of euphemisms like equity instead of equality, or misinformation instead of disagreement, reveals how public discourse is being sanitized for ideological conformity. Studies from media analysis platforms and think tanks such as FAIR show that certain words, especially those tied to dissent or systemic critique, are algorithmically downranked or flagged on platforms like YouTube and Twitter X. Conclusion to mimetic mind, language, symbols, and the architecture of belief. Language is not neutral. It encodes worldviews, channels desire, and creates boundaries around what is possible to think or say. When memes, slogans, legal codes, and institutional narratives converge, they form what might be called a symbolic superstructure, a reality matrix so convincing, many never think to question it. To begin reclaiming autonomy, we must first reclaim our words. We must ask who defined this term? Who benefits from this frame? Which phrases shape my reality without my consent? Until we do, we remain subjects not of a government, but of a grammar, obedient not to law but to language. Which phrases shape your reality most, without your consent? Section 3. Emotional algorithms, the market of mood, and the tyranny of positivity. In this section, we examine how our emotional states are no longer purely personal, but have become programmable components of the belief machine. We explore how algorithms favor happiness over honesty, how psychiatric systems medicalize legitimate emotional responses, and how even righteous anger can be dismissed in favor of emotional obedience. The result is a culture that rewards emotional conformity while labeling nonconformity as dysfunction. In a world saturated with content, image, and ideology, our feelings are no longer private experiences, they are marketable data. Emotions are filtered, monetized, and manipulated to maintain a climate of performative wellness. Cultural narratives promote the erasure of emotional depth in favor of positivity, productivity, and inoffensiveness. Yet denying the shadow within us is not healing, it is programming, algorithmic optimism, and emotional censorship. On platforms like Instagram and TikTok, content that is emotionally raw or uncomfortable is often suppressed or flagged as harmful, while curated displays of happiness, empowerment, and transformation are elevated. Studies by the Center for Humane Technology reveal that algorithmic bias consistently favors dopamine-producing content, short, punchy, and emotionally pleasing. This dynamic has led to what Barbara Ehrenreich called toxic positivity, a culture where discomfort is pathologized and the pressure to be happy becomes a form of repression. In workplaces, public spaces, and even in mental health industries, acceptable emotion is prescripted. Personal scenario: resistance through frustration. At one point in my journey, I recall feeling deep frustration, anger, and disappointment, not from trauma, but from clarity. I saw the systemic contradictions and the emotional manipulation used to engineer compliance. Yet when I tried to voice it publicly, I was told to calm down. You're crazy. You need to take your meds today. You're a conspiracy theorist. You don't know what you're talking about. You're delusional. My authentic reaction was dismissed not because it was harmful, but because it was unprofitable, unpalatable, and above all, uncontrollable, and not conducive to manipulators' plans. Too many are fast asleep to the collapse and destruction happening all around them. For many, mentally and emotionally, there is nobody home, and it has become obvious for many to see. They are trapped within the mechanism of control and obedience. That's when I realized emotional control isn't about protecting others from harm, it's about maintaining a narrative that keeps people manageable. The medicalization of emotion. Modern psychiatry has contributed to this emotional flattening. Natural reactions, grief, loneliness, and existential angst are swiftly labeled as disorders. While medication can be life-saving, it's also become a tool of conformity. According to psychiatrist and author Dr. Joanna Moncrief, the pharmaceutical model of mental health often reduces deep existential experiences to chemical imbalances, bypassing the need for deeper inquiry or personal transformation. Self-reflection exercise, deprogramming emotional conformity. Think of an emotion you were recently discouraged from expressing, e.g. anger, sadness, grief, or fear. Ask, was it dismissed, medicated, pathologized, or redirected? Reflect on the message you received. Be strong, don't cry, don't make it about you. Move on, be grateful. Now ask yourself, who benefited from my emotional silence? What truth might that emotion have revealed if I had been allowed to feel it fully? Activity, mapping the mood machine. Instructions. For one day, write down every time your emotional state is altered by an external input, an ad, a headline, a tweet, or a post. Label the emotion you felt: envy, urgency, amusement, shame, fear. Next to each emotion, identify the underlying message or call to action. Was it to buy, to obey, to click, to shame someone else? Reflect. How many of your feelings were truly your own? Suggested reading and further research. Bright-Sided: How Positive Thinking is Undermining America, by Barbara Ehrenreich. An investigation into the cult of optimism and its suppressive effects on critical thought and emotional honesty. The Sedated Society, edited by James Davies. A collection of essays that examine the medicalization of normal emotional experiences and the politics of psychiatry. The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff. A deep dive into how digital platforms monetize emotional and behavioral data. Cracked: Why Psychiatry is Doing More Harm Than Good by James Davies. A critical look at how the pharmaceutical model pathologizes human emotion. Reality Slaves: The Weaponization of Emotion in a Culture of Control by Neil Kramer. An independent philosophical work that explores how emotional manipulation is used to foster conformity and internal obedience. Conclusion to Section 3. True emotional sovereignty begins when we no longer ask permission to feel. The culture of constant happiness, fueled by algorithmic logic and medical conformity, is not a cure, it's a system of sedation. To reclaim our full selves, we must stop viewing emotion as a liability and recognize it as intelligence. Feeling deeply in a culture that rewards emotional numbness is not dysfunction, it's freedom and rebellion against. Section 4. Manufactured desire, the engine of endless craving. Desire has become a coded mechanism within capitalist systems. It no longer emerges from genuine need, but from curated lack. Social media, advertising, and entertainment offer a revolving door of false problems with products posing as solutions. From skincare to crypto, the cycle is endless. Problem, desire, solution, repeat. A clear example lies in the multi-billion-dollar skincare and beauty industry. Products are often marketed using celebrity endorsements or influencers, people whose curated appearance becomes aspirational. The implicit message, if you buy this, you'll be like them. But it's not about beauty. It's about triggering pride and vanity, targeting individuals' insecurities by exploiting their internal comparisons. I've seen this firsthand. Many are drawn to facial and grooming products endorsed by high-profile figures. Not because they needed them, but because they believed they'd be perceived as more confident or attractive. The promise was never the product, it was the projected identity. Yet beauty isn't what people truly respond to. What matters is how someone makes you feel. No amount of makeup or surface enhancement replaces sincerity, kindness, and integrity. Makeup is often a mask, an illusion of control over one's self-image. I'm not against people choosing to beautify themselves, but when the industry profits off emotional vulnerability, it becomes predatory. These aren't tools of confidence, they're masks of insecurity. The danger deepens when this desire turns into compulsion. The rise in dangerous surgeries, such as Brazilian butt lifts, reveals how far people will go to overcome internal voids. According to a 2022 study by the Aesthetic Surgery Journal, the mortality rate for BBLs remains as high as 1 in 3,000, the highest among cosmetic procedures. People are dying to look good, but you can't look good as a rotting corpse. Then there's Botox and fillers, marketed as confidence boosters but chemically containing botulinum toxin, one of the most poisonous biological substances known. Research published in neurotoxicology has shown that Botox can impair emotional recognition and neurological function by disrupting neurotransmitter activity. The supposed cure for self-image issues may, ironically, interfere with emotional processing, creating more internal distress. People are no longer individuals, they are duplicating themselves in the image of another, hence the meme shown. Everyone looks the same. What people think is making them stand out is placing them all into a category and value where there is no standout. There's no uniqueness in a duplicate of another. These industries do not profit from confidence. They profit from self-doubt, constantly feeding the illusion that happiness and validation lie just one purchase away. They sell masks not to protect us, but to pacify the ache we've been programmed to carry. Real beauty, the kind that empowers, cannot be sold. It's experienced in authentic human connection, in unfiltered presence, and in how we make others feel. When we let go of the mask, we make space for truth. And that truth dismantles the machine of manufactured craving. The commodification of identity. We are told to be ourselves, but in practice we are sold identities. Eco-conscious, alpha male, spiritual goddess, entrepreneurial hustler. These are not authentic personas. They are marketing templates designed to monetize individuality. At its core, commodified identity is the process of transforming complex human selfhood into consumer archetypes. It reduces identity to aesthetic, function, and market behavior. Below is a breakdown of how this system operates. From the corporation's perspective: input, market research, trend data, psychological profiling, and demographic analysis. Process, develop lifestyle archetypes, e.g. wellness guru, minimalist techie, masculine rebel. Output, product bundles, advertising narratives, targeted content, social media campaigns that sell a ready-made identity, e.g. fitness programs with supplements, tech gear, clothing styles. and self-help language. From the consumer's perspective, input, exposure to curated influencer lifestyles, targeted ads, and algorithmic suggestions. Process, internalization of a lack or identity gap. I'm not productive enough. I'm not spiritual enough. I'm not attractive enough. Output, consumer action, buying products, adopting behavioral patterns, mimicking influencer speech, even altering life goals. This cycle ensures that the identity sold by the corporation becomes the perceived desire of the consumer. Rather than developing a self through lived experience and introspection, individuals are nudged into buying and performing roles engineered to be aspirational, but unattainable. The result is a paradox. In the pursuit of individuality, the consumer becomes more generic, more predictable, and ultimately more controllable. When identity is tied to consumption, the self becomes fragile. Any interruption in market access, product availability, or trend relevance can destabilize the consumer's sense of being. The commodification of identity is not just a loss of authenticity, it's the strategic dismantling of selfhood to build a marketplace of insecurity. One dimension often overlooked is the role of data feedback loops in accelerating this process. Every click, like, search, and pause on a piece of content generates behavioral data. This data is not just used to sell to you, but to refine who you are in algorithmic terms. Your identity becomes not just a consumer category, but a data shadow, an evolving behavioral profile that shapes what you see, think, and desire next. This predictive model of identity commodification creates a recursive prison. You engage with content that resonates with your programmed self, and the system feeds you more of it, narrowing your awareness and reinforcing artificial aspirations. The identity you believe you're choosing is merely the most optimized outcome of a data model that has already decided what's most profitable for you to want. Craving as control. Desire today is not a spontaneous human impulse, it is a behavioral script, carefully crafted and looped back through feedback mechanisms that sustain dependence. Craving has become the most powerful form of behavioral control. Big tech, social platforms, and e-commerce giants weaponize our attention through psychological design. The goal is no longer to satisfy desire, but to extend it indefinitely. The longer you want, the longer you engage, and the more data, money, and control the system gains. In a 2021 study by the Center for Humane Technology, researchers detailed how infinite scrolling, autoplay, and push notifications exploit dopamine feedback loops, keeping users locked in states of unresolved curiosity and manufactured lack. The trigger is small, an ad, a video suggestion, a you might also like pop-up, but the cumulative effect is cognitive fragmentation and unconscious conditioning. Craving becomes identity. If I crave, I exist. If I own, I am. This replacement of being with having was already warned of by thinkers like Erich Fromm in To Have or To Be, but now it is coded into the digital interfaces we interact with daily. More dangerously, craving is used to engineer behavioral compliance. Limited time offers, digital scarcity, fear of missing out, known as FOMO, and algorithmic envy create a climate of urgency. The system says obey now or lose everything. This is no longer commerce, it is coercion through craving. The illusion of choice. What appears as diversity, thousands of products, hundreds of apps, endless options, is often just curated redundancy. Most choices are aesthetic overlays on the same function, narrowing real autonomy. Take digital platforms. Whether it's Twitter X, Instagram, TikTok, or Threads, each promises unique features, yet all ultimately serve the same corporate logic: data extraction, behavioral prediction, and emotional engagement. The diversity is theatrical, the control is real. Economist Joseph Stiglitz and psychologist Barry Schwartz, author of The Paradox of Choice, both note that excessive consumer options can lead to anxiety, paralysis, and dissatisfaction. In other words, the more we are told we are free to choose, the less satisfied we become with our choices. The illusion of choice is not freedom. It is the cage painted with 1,000 colors. Self-reflection prompt. When I desire something, am I expressing myself or mimicking someone else? Cultural framing insight. freedom of choice is often a cover story for freedom of manipulation. The more convinced we are that we're choosing, the less likely we are to examine who created the menu in the first place. Desire is now predictive. Tech companies design user interfaces based on behavioral psychology to trigger compulsive engagement. A study by Tristan Harris, a former Google ethicist, revealed that infinite scroll, like buttons, and autoplay were engineered to hijack the brain's dopamine systems, keeping users in a state of incomplete satisfaction. Let's pause for a moment if you care to join in on an activity. Activity, the loop of lack. Instructions. Pick a recent purchase or a strong desire you had to buy something. Reflect. Where did you first encounter this product or idea? IG, an ad influencer algorithmic recommendation. What emotional or psychological message was attached to it? E.g., you're not enough, you'll be safer, you'll belong. Journal the before, during and after states of that desire. Was it truly your desire, or did it arrive through external programming? Activity response. The loop of lack, my self-discoveries from my early 20s. Item of craving. A premium grooming set endorsed by a celebrity influencer, a trend of the time. Where I first encountered it, television, magazines, talk shows, advertising in men's magazines, and the promotion of metrosexuality of the period. I felt somewhat aligned, and I identified comfortably with the look, externally presented. Emotional message attached. This will make you more attractive and confident. 4. I felt a mild sense of inadequacy when comparing myself to people featured in the marketing. That was the intention. Haring, I imagined becoming more respected or noticed if I looked more polished. After the product arrived, I used it on some occasions, and the boost was only temporary. I quickly returned to my usual self-perception and questioned the influence of the marketing that manipulated my momentary insecurity. Reflection. This wasn't a desire born from within. It was a response to an externally implanted insecurity, desire to be noticed, to be integrated and similar to others. Pictured is me now. My aesthetic is of my choosing, not because of how I want people to view me, but through the conscious personal choices of how I desire to look, my choice in clothing, my choice in color and style. The clothes feel comfortable to wear and suit my physical body type and my budget, etc. I feel happy within. I am not interested in impressing others, wearing high-value garments and labels to be noticed, so that aids in my being more confident, unique to myself. I turned my attention inwards, an inverse from the past, therefore I see myself, not as a contributor to monetized metrics or to fit a particular archetype. I am just me. Conclusion to manufactured desire, the engine of endless craving. Desire, once a signal of organic yearning, has been weaponized into a system of manufactured control, coded, tracked, and monetized. Today, craving is not a reflection of what we truly want, but a mirror of what we've been told to want. Corporations no longer sell products. They sell versions of the self, and each transaction is a ritual of compliance that reinforces the architecture of control. Reflecting on my journey, I recall moments when I was drawn into that loop. The purchase of grooming sets endorsed by celebrities' mass influence, under the impression it would elevate my confidence, or how others perceived me. But in hindsight, those desires weren't mine. They were implanted impressions, mirages constructed by marketing algorithms and social comparison. When I paused, disconnected from the external narrative, and looked inward, I saw a clearer truth. My aesthetic, my choices, my appearance, these things should serve me, not a corporate ideal. Today, my choices in style, color, and expression come from a place of self-defined comfort, authenticity, and alignment, not from aspiration to emulate a template. I wear what feels right for my body type, my emotional state, and my reality. Not to impress, but to inhabit. Not to belong, but to be. And in that decision, I reclaimed something they couldn't sell, sovereignty of self. This internal shift, a redirection of desire from external validation to inner congruence, marks the real rebellion. It dismantles the belief machine at its root. Because when desire is no longer controllable, neither are we. Make no mistake, craving is not just a product of consumerism. It is a tool of governance, a psychological operating system, a loop of programmed dissatisfaction. The illusion of choice disguises an architecture of coercion. Whether it's beauty, wealth, technology, or belonging, the system thrives on our inability to sit with who we already are. But now I ask myself, who authored that craving? Who benefits if I comply? The answers are revealing. And once you've seen the script, you can stop playing the role. As we move into section 5, we begin to explore how to break the spell, to question the origin of our beliefs, deconstruct our internal narratives, and embrace an inner sovereignty that resists commodification. If craving is the engine of illusion, then consciousness is the antidote. Let's step into the rewiring. Desire, once the language of aspiration, is now a script of conformity. As long as craving can be redirected, identity can be shaped, and control can be maintained. The way out begins by reclaiming our wants, examining them not just as expressions of self, but as messages from a system that profits from our emptiness. Section 5. Rewriting Reality, Consciousness, Deconstruction, and Inner Liberation. This section explores how personal liberation begins with the deconstruction of inherited beliefs and the conscious rejection of manipulated narratives. We will journey into techniques of inner discernment, silence as resistance, and the reclaiming of individual sovereignty. What does it truly mean to think your thoughts in a world filled with programming? The inward turn. Freedom, I've realized, is not found in louder expression or more information, but in quiet. In the unmarketed, unfiltered moments where you can sit with your thoughts and ask, are these even mine? Many of the beliefs we hold about success, purpose, and identity aren't personal, they're inherited. Studies in social psychology, like Solomon Asher's conformity experiments, reveal how susceptible we are to adopting beliefs through group dynamics and perceived authority, not reasoned reflection. From childhood, we are conditioned through systems, family scripts, schooling, media, and religion to adopt belief systems we rarely question. Philosopher Michel Foucault described this as regimes of truth, narratives that circulate as unquestionable, even when they serve specific structures of power. The process of unlearning is painful. I've experienced deep internal dissonance when I began to challenge core beliefs, such as the notion that productivity equals worth. It was as if I were betraying my past self or rejecting people I admired. But beneath the grief was space. In that space, a clarity began to emerge. Who am I when no one is looking and nothing is expected? That's where the inward turn began. This mirrors the journey Carl Jung described as individuation, the process of integrating unconscious beliefs, patterns, and archetypes to become a fully realized self. It is the inward hero's journey, not glamorous or viral, but utterly transformative. Language as a mirror, silence as power. Language does more than describe reality, it creates it. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis in linguistic anthropology suggests that the structure of language influences perception. If our words frame experience, then our silence may hold the potential to transcend it. Mystics across traditions, from Christian contemplatives to Zen monks, have long turned to silence not as a rejection of the world, but as a return to the self. Silence interrupts the scripts we've internalized. It pauses the performance. When I sat in true silence for the first time, no phone, no background music, no mental rehearsal, I became acutely aware of how loud my inner programming was. It wasn't silence I feared, it was confronting the echo chamber of my unchallenged beliefs. The late philosopher Alan Watts once said, "You are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago." Silence is what creates the gap that allows that transformation. It is in silence that I began to observe without filtering through identity. I noticed how often my speech was performative in the past, curated not for truth, not lying with non-truths, but for approval. Silence also dissolves dualities. In that space, I wasn't the role, the brand, the thinker, I was simply aware. And in that awareness, my thoughts lost their grip. I realized I was not my thoughts, I was the one watching them. And that realization became the first key to freedom. Language is a double-edged sword. It reveals, but it also restricts. There is a reason why mystics and seekers across time have retreated into silence, not to escape the world, but to escape the program. Every time I've silenced the constant commentary in my mind, I've noticed a shift, from narrative to noticing, from story to presence. In this state, there are no slogans, no demands, just awareness. The moment I could sit with discomfort without reacting, label myself without judgment, and feel without performing, that was the moment I began to liberate myself. It's not that beliefs are inherently bad, but when you realize they are optional, something shifts. From indoctrination to intuition. Intuition is often misunderstood as vague or irrational, but many spiritual and psychological traditions honor it as a deeper form of knowing. The philosopher Henry Bergson described intuition as a direct perception of reality, unmediated by analysis. In Eastern traditions like Taoism, intuition is akin to flowing with the Tao, moving in harmony with the unseen order of things. In neuroscience, the concept of thin slicing, explored by Malcolm Gladwell in Blink, shows how our subconscious minds make accurate judgments from limited information, long before conscious thought kicks in. This isn't mysticism, it's biology and deep pattern recognition. Yet society teaches us to distrust this faculty. In school, we're rewarded for repeating facts, not feeling resonance. In relationships, we ignore gut instincts in favor of socially approved behavior. At work, we chase goals that feel empty because they're framed as meaningful by others. Reconnecting with my intuition required solitude, nature, and a rejection of constant noise. When I quieted the mental chatter, subtle but clear signals emerged. This feels right, that doesn't. I began recognizing when my energy contracted around a lie or expanded in the presence of truth. Intuition became not just a compass, but an anchor. The Sufi poet Rumi wrote, "There is a voice that doesn't use words." Listen. When I finally did, I heard myself, not the version the world wanted, but the one I had buried beneath its expectations. Conscious deprogramming techniques. Language audit. Track the phrases and labels you use daily, e.g., I must, I should, I can't. Ask, where did these come from? Reframing practice. Take a negative belief, I'm not good enough, and reframe it from the perspective of a friend, child, or higher self. Observe the shift. Silence ritual. Spend 10 minutes a day in complete silence, no input, no speaking. Let the mental noise arise and just witness it. This is the gateway to seeing the architecture of your belief machine. Personal integration. I no longer dress, speak, or behave with the subconscious goal of fitting a marketed identity. My choices are conscious now. My aesthetic is not a brand, it's a comfort, a congruence. I don't need to be noticed to feel valid. The peace I've found in wearing what feels right, not what sells, is more powerful than any trend. I've stopped trying to be someone else's idea of me. I am just me, and that is where sovereignty begins. Let's now pause for an activity and self-reflection, if you care to join in. Activity: deconstruct a belief. Instructions: choose one core belief you hold, e.g., success means wealth. I must be productive to be valuable. Trace its origin. When did you first hear it? Who repeated it? What emotions surround it? Examine the language used in the belief. What metaphors or imagery does it contain? Reflect. Who benefits from my believing this? Decide, does this belief serve me now? If not, how can I replace it? Amped for reflection. What would your life look like if you only believed what you discovered to be true? Conclusion to rewriting reality: consciousness, deconstruction, and inner liberation. Rewriting reality is not about replacing one illusion with another. It's about dissolving the illusions altogether. As I've peeled back the layers of conditioning, what I found was not emptiness, but stillness. Not confusion, but clarity. And in that clarity, a deeper question emerged. Who am I really beneath the noise, the story, and the skin? The process of deconstruction is not always clean or linear. There are days when I catch myself falling back into the old scripts. But even that awareness is progress. The truth is, liberation doesn't always feel liberating. It can feel like isolation, like grief, like chaos. But beyond that lies a still point, an unshakable core of awareness that no brand, belief, or algorithm can reach. Philosopher Krishnamurti once said, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. To rewrite reality, we must be willing to stand apart, to lose social approval, to think in silence and act from presence. This isn't rebellion for its own sake. It's remembering what we were before the scripts began. In my quietest moments, I realized that sovereignty is not about control. It's about presence, about choosing with clarity who I am and how I engage with the world, not because someone sold it to me, but because I know it to be true. I've stopped asking who I'm supposed to be. I've started asking what's real." And so this journey of deprogramming brings us to the next frontier, the mythic layer. The archetypal patterns, ancient scripts, and symbolic systems that have silently guided cultures, institutions, and beliefs for millennia. If belief is the software, myth is the operating system. To truly understand the engine of reality, we must look at the stories beneath the stories. Section 6. Myths we inherit, archetypes, ideologies, and the invisible scripts. In this section, we'll explore the deeper symbolic architectures beneath our beliefs, the myths, archetypes, and cultural scripts that invisibly shape how we perceive reality. Myths aren't ancient relics. They are living, active forces woven into the design of our institutions, our language, our psychology, and our culture. These timeless patterns influence how we define good and evil, power and weakness, success and failure. What we think is a personal belief often originates in a collective story. From the heroic individualism of the Western entrepreneur to the redemption arc sold by self-help movements, we'll unravel how inherited myths subtly condition our self-concepts and social structures. Are we choosing who we are, or are we reenacting ancient roles written long before our time? We'll draw on the work of Carl Jung, Joseph Campbell, Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and contemporary mythologists, psychologists, and cultural critics. We'll look at the mythic structures embedded in everything from national identity to product marketing, and investigate how archetypes are leveraged to create emotional resonance and mass obedience. To reclaim authorship over our lives, we must first recognize the scripts we're performing. Let's begin. This section explores how the myth of the lone hero, adapted into the modern archetype of the entrepreneurial hustler, shapes our beliefs about success, self-worth, and productivity. Drawing from Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, neoliberal capitalism, and the rise of hustle culture, we'll examine how this myth has been commodified into a performance loop of perpetual striving. The hero and the hustler. The modern world no longer looks to slay dragons but to conquer markets, not to rescue kingdoms but to scale startups. The myth of the hero has mutated from an inner journey of growth into a competitive, externally validated climb toward visibility, virality, and valuation. In this narrative, rest is failure, reflection is weakness, and burnout is worn like a badge of honor. Joseph Campbell's monomyth once offered a spiritual blueprint for transformation, departure, initiation, return. But under capitalism, the heroic arc is hijacked, transformed into hustle, launch, and monetize. Neoliberalism reframes this journey as meritocracy. Anyone can win if they grind hard enough. Yet this belief overlooks systemic inequality, luck, and exploitation, enforcing a script where personal value is tethered to output. Psychological impact. Psychologists like Dr. Gabor Mate have warned about the trauma hidden beneath overachievement. In his work on addiction and stress, he shows how many high performers use work to distract from emotional pain. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization estimates burnout has become a global phenomenon, especially among youth who tie their identity to career success. Case example. Social media platforms like LinkedIn and TikTok now elevate grindfluencers, entrepreneurs who chronicle waking at 4 a.m., taking cold plunges, and working 16-hour days. Their followers are sold not just advice, but identity. The myth becomes a product. Philosophical counterpoint. The Taoist master Laozi wrote, "Doing nothing is better than being busy doing nothing." In a society that equates busyness with virtue, stillness becomes radical. Reflection prompt. When did I start believing that constant doing is proof of my value? Here we investigate how religious redemption arcs have migrated into modern psychology and media, from the addict-turned-influencer to the guru who overcame darkness, drawing from Jung's shadow integration and biblical redemption narratives. We'll question the commodification of trauma into marketable transformation. The redeemed sinner. In the age of personal branding, suffering has become a currency and redemption, a marketing strategy. The redeemed sinner trope frames pain not as something to be healed quietly, but as a performative credential. Redemption is no longer spiritual, it's profitable. This archetype draws heavily from Christian motifs: the fall, the confession, the rebirth. In modern form, it is weaponized on social media and in the self-help industry. Pain is packaged into TED Talks, memoirs, and coaching programs. The message becomes, because I suffered, I now deserve your trust, attention, and money. Psychological insight. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, our unconscious repressed aspects, teaches that true integration requires confronting the darkness, not marketing it. But social platforms reward overexposure, not transformation. As psychoanalyst Adam Phillips warns, we often confuse the desire to be known with the desire to be healed. Example scenario: a former addict who now sells healing courses, using their trauma narrative as proof of authority. While their story may be true, the monetization creates tension between authenticity and performance. Cultural analysis. This dynamic is not confined to individuals. Entire industries, from reality TV to wellness brands, capitalize on the illusion that transformation is a product, not a process. A spiritual perspective. The Sufi mystic Rumi wrote, "Don't get lost in your pain. Know that one day your pain will become your cure." But in a culture obsessed with visibility, many turn the cure into content. Reflection prompt. Is my story being lived or branded? The sacred nation. In this section, we examine how the myth of the nation-state is rooted in ancient symbols and religious archetypes, manufactured to instill a sense of collective identity and purpose. Nations are not just political entities, they are belief systems. From anthems and flags to founding myths and heroic narratives, the modern state creates a sacred aura around itself, demanding emotional loyalty through ritual, story, and spectacle. The idea of the nation-state is a relatively recent invention, formalized only in the last few centuries with the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. Yet it draws on far older religious and mythological templates. National holidays mirror religious feast days. The founding fathers resemble prophets. War memorials take on the atmosphere of temples. Flags represent symbolic identity, and many other aspects in law. They are not just pieces of fabric. They are representative. The myth of the sacred nation is most evident in political rhetoric. Leaders often frame their countries as chosen, exceptional, or beacons of hope. The United States, for example, has long relied on the notion of manifest destiny, an ideological belief that it was divinely ordained to spread liberty. This idea echoes biblical narratives of divine mission and conquest. Ecological perspective. Social identity theory, Tajfel and Turner, 1979, explains how group membership enhances self-esteem. When individuals tie their worth to national identity, they are more likely to defend that group, regardless of the morality of its actions. This is how wars are justified and dissent is silenced. Example scenario: the narrative of Britain standing alone in World War II is often invoked to justify national pride and exceptionalism, even when used to downplay current global interdependence or distract from domestic failures. Mythologizing the past distorts the present. Spiritual perspective. Clarissa Pinkola Estes writes, "When you lose track of your soul, go back to your story. But when your story has been replaced by a state-scripted myth, you may never meet your soul at all." Instead of personal mythology, individuals live out state mythology. Skeptical view. Critics like Noam Chomsky argue that nationalism is a form of manufactured consent, used to align the masses with elite interests. George Orwell wrote in Notes on Nationalism that nationalism is not the love of one's country, but the belief in its superiority and the desire for dominance. Quote, Patriotism is the conviction that your country is superior to all others because you were born in it. George Bernard Shaw. Reflection. What parts of my identity are truly mine, and what parts were gifted to me by my passport? The product as prophecy. This section explores how modern consumer goods are marketed not just as products, but as prophecies. We no longer buy for utility, we buy to become. Corporations use mythic storytelling, archetypes, and aspirational narratives to encode meaning into everything from cars to cosmetics. In this structure, brands become belief systems, and products become sacred symbols. Every advertisement is a promise, not just of satisfaction, but transformation. A razor doesn't shave hair, it makes you more masculine. A perfume doesn't scent your skin, it evokes desire. The product is no longer the thing, it's the prophecy of who you could become. Drawing on Roland Barthes' theory of mythologies, we see how marketing appropriates cultural symbols to manufacture meaning. Luxury cars symbolize status, control, and even sexual power. Tech gadgets suggest intelligence, modernity, and mastery. Skincare is no longer about care, it's about conformity to an aesthetic ideal, often racialized, gendered, and class-coded. Example scenario: a beauty campaign features a celebrity with flawless skin, claiming to use a particular serum. But the image is airbrushed. The lifestyle presented is inaccessible. The subtext is, buy this and you'll be seen as worthy. The product becomes a socially coded entry point to belonging. Philosophical insight. French philosopher Jean Baudrillard argued in Simulacra and Simulation that in a media-saturated society, symbols replace reality. We consume not the object, but the meaning assigned to it. This is how a £5 t-shirt becomes a £500 luxury label. Spiritual counterpoint. In Buddhist philosophy, craving is the root of suffering. The product prophecy loop is craving by design, feeding the illusion that fulfillment lies outside of us, in something we must acquire. Oh, you are not buying a product. You are buying an identity. Douglas Rushkoff. The new pantheon. This section explores how celebrities, influencers, and even algorithms now occupy the role of modern gods. They model behavior, define morality, and bestow symbolic blessings through attention, validation, and status. Like the ancient pantheons, these figures represent archetypes, yet their divinity is constructed by media and monetized through platforms. In ancient Greece, gods had distinct personalities and domains: war, love, and wisdom. Today's influencers do too: the fitness guru, the beauty queen, the hustle king. They don't just sell products, they embody ideals. Their followers become disciples, modeling behavior, repeating slogans, and defending them like devotees. Algorithms act as high priests, deciding who is visible and who is silenced. TikTok's For You page is a digital oracle, whispering the next chosen one. Virality becomes a form of divine favor. But these gods are fallible. One scandal, and they are exiled, replaced by another. In this cycle, worship becomes disposable. Psychological impact. Parasocial relationships, where viewers feel a bond with media figures who don't know they exist, distort emotional boundaries. We project our unmet needs onto these digital gods, hoping their glow will illuminate us. Philosophical note. Nietzsche declared, God is dead, but perhaps he was only replaced by screens. Where once we turned to deities for meaning, we now scroll for it. The pantheon lives on, branded, monetized, and algorithmically ordained. Spiritual warning. As Clarissa Pinkola Estes warns, when we make others our gods, we stop listening to our soul. Reflection. Whose approval have I mistaken for meaning? The trickster architect. The trickster is chaos personified, neither hero nor villain, but a necessary force of disruption. In mythology, the trickster exposes hypocrisy, shatters illusions, and mocks sacred cows. From Loki in Norse mythology to Coyote in Native American folklore, this archetype thrives in uncertainty. The trickster's role is not to destroy for destruction's sake, but to unsettle the rigid and expose the absurd. In our modern culture, this energy is channeled through satirists, comedians, hackers, and provocateurs, those who question norms, laugh at power, and dance at the edge of chaos. The trickster refuses binary thinking. In Jungian psychology, the trickster archetype represents the unconscious's attempt to break through the ego's rigidity. Tricksters speak in paradoxes, perform reversals, and point out the absurdity of belief structures taken too seriously. Modern tricksters include figures like George Carlin, Banksy, Russell Brand, and anonymous meme makers. They hold a mirror up to culture, refracting truth through irony and inversion. In authoritarian regimes, the trickster can be dangerous. Mockery, after all, is subversion. Yet in free societies, the trickster can be healing, disrupting stale dogma and refreshing collective awareness. Philosophical lens. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch overlaps with the trickster's ethos, the rejection of herd morality and the embrace of becoming. Where society demands certainty, the trickster reminds us of impermanence and contradiction. Spiritual insight. In indigenous traditions, the trickster is often the initiator of transformation. By breaking boundaries, he forces growth. In alchemical terms, he's the agent of chaos required before transmutation. Reflection. Where in my life have I clung to seriousness when laughter might have set me free? The devil and the shadow of God. Is evil real, or is it misunderstood? In this final layer, we examine the devil not as a monster, but as a myth, an archetypal mirror of our unintegrated shadow. Historically, the devil as we know him is a composite figure, drawn from pagan deities, medieval fears, and biblical reinterpretation. But beyond dogma lies a profound metaphor. The devil represents the unacknowledged, the repressed, the parts of ourselves we exile. The figure of the devil did not exist in early Jewish theology as a singular entity of cosmic evil. Satan in the Hebrew Bible is an adversary, a tester of faith, not a demonic overlord. Over time, especially in medieval Christianity, this figure was embellished into a horned, malevolent force. But many scholars argue this was more social control than metaphysical reality. In Jungian psychology, the devil is the shadow, the unconscious aspects of self we disown. Repression leads to projection. What we hate in others often reflects what we deny in ourselves. Thus, the devil is not to be feared but understood. As Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Philosophical insight. Polarity is not opposition, it is completion. Good and evil are not warring absolutes, but necessary complements in a dualistic system. Like the Taoist yin and yang, each contains the seed of the other. To fear darkness is to remain fragmented. Integrate is to become whole. Spiritual interpretation. Some mystics see the devil not as a fallen angel, but as a teacher. Suffering, temptation, and error become initiations. The choice is always there, to awaken or to remain asleep. The shadow guides us to growth or traps us in cycles of denial. Example scenario. Moments of moral failure, envy, deception, and rage are often suppressed out of shame. But acknowledging them can be liberating. They show us where we are still unconscious. The devil, then, becomes a symbol of unmetabolized truth. Reflection prompt. What fear, if faced honestly, might lead me to freedom? Conclusion to myths. We inherit archetypes, ideologies, and the invisible scripts. As we close this section on inherited myths, symbolic frameworks, and scripts, one truth becomes clear. Belief isn't merely learned, it is lived. These archetypes and narratives don't just shape what we think, they shape who we are. The hero, the hustler, the redeemer, the sacred patriot, the consumer of prophecy, the trickster, and even the devil himself. These are not characters from fables. They are the masks we wear, the scripts we perform, the stories through which we navigate life. But seeing the script is the first step to rewriting it. This is not a call to abandon myth, but to engage it consciously. When we see the architecture of belief, we reclaim authorship of identity. And we realize that the gods we worship, celebrity, success, nation, beauty, were built in the image of our unspoken fears and unclaimed desires. The devil, then, is not an enemy, but a mirror. The hero is not a savior, but a seeker. The product is not a transformation, but a symbol of our longing. And myth itself, neither prison nor prophecy, but a portal, a threshold through which we can return to ourselves. In recognizing the mythic codes embedded in culture, we liberate ourselves not by rejecting them, but by engaging them with full awareness. We choose our masks, we tell our stories. We meet the divine not in dogma, but in reflection. Let this awareness lead us to the final phase of our journey. Conclusion. Episode 17 of the Inversiverse Belief Machines, Language, Desire, and the Engine of Reality. What we believe for ourselves. It acts through us, it speaks for us, it chooses on our behalf. And yet, if there's one truth that we've uncovered throughout this journey, it's that belief is not fixed. It is fluid, it is programmable, and it is, when seen clearly, reclaimable. Through this episode, we have peeled back the polished veneer of progress, dismantled the seductive promises of control, traced the architecture of our cravings, exposed the theatre of virtue, and confronted the ancient myths that script our every move. We have seen the hero, the hustler, the redeemer, the patriot, the consumer, the influencer, the trickster, and even the devil, not as separate archetypes, but as mirrors to our inner states and blueprints of collective manipulation. Perhaps most powerfully, we have rediscovered something elemental. Beneath the programming, beyond the symbols and the simulations, there is a witness, a self, a quiet awareness that is neither swayed nor sold. It is this self that can observe the myth without becoming it. It is this awareness that can feel the emotion, hear the story, and still choose differently. You are not your cravings. You are not your social mask. You are not your national identity or your trauma badge or your curated aesthetic. You are what remains when all of that falls away. As I have walked this journey myself, I have learned that authenticity is not a performance. It is an unlearning, a return, a choice to live, not for approval, but for truth. That journey is never over, but it begins with a single moment of recognition. This belief is not mine. From that moment on, you are no longer the machine. You are the mechanic. So, as we end this episode of the Inversiverse, ask yourself, what scripts am I still performing? What masks am I still wearing? And if I were to step off the stage, what remains? This is not the end, it is an invitation. Thanks for watching. I'm James, and until next time, bye-bye.